Welcome to the CES Letter, a closer look. This video presentation is working from the March 31st, 2015 edition of the CES Letter, and will examine pages 22 through 23 that discuss Joseph Smith's first vision. These two pages only mention the 5 first-hand accounts. Most researchers only refer to 4, grouping the two 1835 accounts together, but these are separated in the CES Letter. The actual manuscripts are available at the Joseph Smith Papers Project website, including 5 second-hand accounts. Direct links to these websites are available in the PDF, downloadable at CES Letter, a closer look website at debunkingcesletter.com on page 22. The CES Letter lists multiple concerns regarding the first vision narratives, claiming omissions and contradictions. This video will examine those questions and concerns. Did Joseph Smith contradict himself regarding the motives that drove him to the grove to seek enlightenment in prayer? A more specific question is whether Joseph Smith had only one reason to pray or several. If we assume that Joseph had only one concern, one motive, then any variation from that after first mentioning it could represent a contradiction or a change in his story. However, if we assume that he had several concerns motivating him rather than just one, then there is no conflict. Critics might demand that Joseph Smith relate all concerns in all accounts, but that would be unrealistic because the accounts differ in length and were for different audiences. Why did Joseph Smith wait so long to record the account of the first vision? It appears that he did share it, and the reaction was so traumatic that he chose not to share it again. 2 of the accounts speak of the persecutions Joseph and his family experienced after telling of the first vision. The other 2 say nothing about the interim between the first vision and Angel Moroni's first visit. Other important observations are that Joseph Smith did not even tell his mother when she asked him about it. As early as 1827, antagonists recall Joseph claiming to have conversed with God, and a June 9, 1830 revelation, now Doctrine and Covenants 20, verse 5, declares that Joseph had previously been forgiven of his sins as described in the earliest published reference of the first vision story. Arguing from silence is generally not a strong position. Another question is whether Joseph Smith contradicted himself regarding the divine beings that he reported. If we look at the 5 first-hand and 5 second-hand accounts, we discover that 2 do not refer to deity, and 1 simply mentions the Lord. But the other 7 use essentially the exact same language, referring to 2 personages. In a curiously worded question statement, the CES Letter writes, "Who appears to him? A spirit? An angel? 2 angels? Jesus? Many angels? The Father and the Son?" Are all over the place. As seen above, none of the accounts mention a spirit or an angel or 2 angels, nor do they refer to deity as Jesus or the Father. The author of the CES Letter seems a little confused about what the first vision accounts actually say. But what about the 1832 account, the earliest, that only mentions the Lord? Did Joseph Smith believe the Trinitarian view of the Godhead in 1832? The CES Letter incorrectly identifies the earliest written account of the first vision as being recorded in Joseph Smith's journal. In fact, it was included as a small portion of a longer personal history recorded in the summer of 1832. That document mentions deity multiple times, with Lord being the most common and God next. The CES letter charges that in 1832 Joseph Smith held a Trinitarian view of the Godhead. However, it is clear from his writings and declarations that this is not true. The Book of Mormon contains multiple declarations that clearly differentiate Jesus Christ from Heavenly Father. Just months before, in a vision witnessed also by Sidney Rigdon, Joseph saw the plain separateness of the Father and the Son. And now, after the many testimonies which have been given of him, this is the testimony last of all which we give of him, that he lives. For we saw him, even on the right hand of God, and we heard the voice bearing record that he is the only begotten of the Father. It is clear that even though Joseph Smith did not individually distinguish the Godhead in the 1832 account, he did not then believe the Trinitarian view. Did Joseph Smith contradict himself regarding his 1820 beliefs of the truthfulness of other churches? In 1832, Joseph described his experience prior to praying in 1820. By searching the Scriptures, I found that mankind did not come unto the Lord, but that they had apostatized from the true and living faith, and there was no society or denomination that built upon the gospel of Jesus Christ. The CES letter does not publish this statement, but instead paraphrases it. Joseph said that before praying, he knew that there was no true or living faith or denomination upon the earth. This could be a valid interpretation, but Joseph clarified in the 1838 account, it had never entered into his heart that all of the churches were wrong. The CES letter claims a direct contradiction between the 1832 and the 1838 accounts. The point is debatable. Regardless, it is not a particularly important detail. It might even be considered to be tangential to the message of the first vision. A similar complaint deals with Joseph's memory of how old he was. The 1832 account states Joseph was 15 years old when he had the vision in 1821, while the other accounts state he was 14 years in 1820 when he had the vision. Since the 1832 account was never edited for publication, and since all other accounts agree on the year 1820, this would seem to be a small discrepancy of minimal significance. Were there any religious camp meetings in 1820? The CES letter writes, the historical record shows that there was no revival in Palmyra in 1820. There was one in 1817, and there was another in 1824. In fact, none of the first vision accounts refer to religious revivals. Joseph related, there was in the place where we lived an unusual excitement on the subject of religion. It commenced with the Methodists. If we look at the Palmyra Register for June 23 and July 5 of 1820, we discover a plain reference to a camp meeting by the Society of Methodists. This is a very old charge, which was adequately addressed in a 1969 article by Richard Bushman. The CES letter reprints a Mormon infographic that allegedly compares 4 accounts of the first vision. Unfortunately, it ignores the published 1842 narrative for reasons that will become apparent. The chart seeks to evaluate the presence or absence of 8 specific details. The details chosen, however, are problematic. The length of the 4 accounts are very different, so they would not naturally contain the same information. In addition, 4 of the 8, fully half, deal with deity. As viewed above, none of the accounts mention God the Father, Jesus Christ, or an angelic being. Consequently, 3 of the 8 terms are not found in any of the accounts, leaving only 5 to monitor. It seems that a more scholarly evaluation would examine multiple details as found in this list. In contrast, the items in red are the only ones covered by the chart in the CES letter. If we examine the information on the CES letter chart, we identify inaccuracies and misrepresentations. First, if we compare the chart of the text of the 1832 account, we find that Joseph indeed mentioned a pillar of fire, but that detail is X'd, not checked. This same problem is identified in the last section. It records that there was a pillar of light, but that is insufficient to receive a check mark. It is curious that this topic was included at all. The most problematic section of this chart is found in the November 15, 1835 account. Most researchers do not consider it a separate account. Why? Because it contains only 9 words. It is impossible for it to include all of the information the chart requires. It seems that the methodology employed here constitutes clear evidence of the willingness of its creators to deceive. If they had sought objectivity, it appears they would have skipped this and included the 1842 account, as most scholars do. Even a brief review of the information on the first vision chart in the CES letter shows that it is inaccurate, incomplete, and non-scholarly. An additional concern written in the CES letter is whether the LDS Church has tried to hide the alleged differences in the various accounts. The author writes of how he did not know and was unaware and was never taught. As mentioned earlier, a more scholarly evaluation of the various accounts would likely include many more details. In fact, that study was performed and printed in 1970. Who published it? The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in their April 1970 issue of the Improvement Era, the church's primary magazine. It contained an article by historian James B. Allen discussing the different accounts and included this chart. This information had been printed the previous year in BYU Studies, which is, of course, owned by the church. It is impossible to prove the reality of the first vision by examining sources that speak of it. The short laundry list of allegations found in the CES letter are simply inaccurate, insignificant, or arguing from a position of silence. To be honest, there just isn't a lot of substance here. For more information, consult ldsanswers.net by clicking on the First Vision slider or through the Topics tab.